Gosh, where do I even begin? However, on May the 6th is a day I will never forget. Hey guys, it's Jennifer from 319 Farm and Outdoors. So I figured I would take some time and basically explain things that took place while we were gone on our little hiatus from YouTube. As for you guys that are brand new to our channel, you don't know this, you are not aware that unless you go back and look at our timeline, you can see that we took time away from YouTube for about a year and a month, maybe 13 months total. So we took time away from our channel because of pregnancy with me, and then that I ended up having some health issues that were related to the pregnancy, and then we had other things that took place after that. So, gosh, where do I even begin? So where we left off with you guys, I was probably about 20 weeks along in my pregnancy, and things were going well for a while. Then I had my blood sugar test and I ended up failing the first test and had to go back and have a 3-hour test, which is no fun. You drink this awful tasting, it's like super sweet Sunkist, and it has 100 grams of sugar. You drink this stuff on an empty stomach, and then you have to have your blood sugar tested once an hour for 3 hours. That was no fun. I came back to work after that, and I ended up having, I think my blood sugar actually bottomed out after that because I broke out into this cold sweat. I was shaky. I felt like I was going to pass out. I was able to regain my composure, thankfully, and carry on my day, finish out my day at work. So I found out after that my blood sugar was actually borderline. I was just on the cusp of being considered a gestational diabetic, which totally didn't surprise me one bit. I have a strong family history of diabetes, and my last baby was over 9 pounds, so I was not surprised at all when this came back. Thankfully, I was able to manage it with diet alone. I had to monitor my blood sugars for a period of time and find out, how is my body handling certain foods. And as long as I was really restricting my carbohydrates and obviously my sugars, I was able to carry on without having to go on insulin. Then I started to develop this intense itching all over. I was probably about 30 weeks along at that point, and it was like a mosquito had attacked me everywhere on my body, and I was just itching like crazy. I wouldn't stop. I got angry at times because it was just nonstop. I was frustrated, and I knew something was up. This happened it developed and became very bad over a matter of just probably like 3 or 4 days. I contacted my midwife right away because as a nurse practitioner, I've been trained in knowing certain things that can happen. I'm a family nurse practitioner, but I did have the training that these are certain conditions that can happen during pregnancy to look for in your patients. So I had an idea as to what could be going on with me, and contacted my midwife, and sure enough, she had me get labs drawn. And once those results came back in, it was what I had suspected. I had developed an issue with my liver called cholestasis of pregnancy. It's where the liver stops working appropriately to get rid of the bile salts in your body. And when those bile salts build up, they come to like the surface. Just to break it down the easiest way, it comes to the surface of the skin and causes you just to itch intensely all over the body. It can disrupt your sleep, and it can be, you can develop scratch marks all over. It is no fun whatsoever. Thankfully, there was a medicine that they put me on, which helped to lower that level in my body, which made me kind of coast along safely. They had to keep checking my blood levels throughout the rest of my pregnancy. But what's concerning with this is that women who develop cholestasis of pregnancy have a much higher risk of fetal death after 37 weeks. So they don't opt, they tell you you must deliver at 37 weeks if you're going to continue care with them. So I'm not going to be one to argue and say, no, I need to make sure I go full force to 40 weeks and forget what the statistics say. I'm going to go ahead and deliver my baby at 37 weeks. But with a 37 weeker, you have the increased chances that he or she may end up having to go to the NICU. So we were kind of prepared for that to possibly happen. I prepared myself for the worst, but hope for the best, that she would not have to. But because I was advanced in my age with this pregnancy, I had the higher than normal blood sugars, and then I had the cholestasis of pregnancy. I had to have multiple ultrasounds, which then revealed I had excessive fluid in my belly. Not my belly, but in around the baby. They call that polyhydramnios, and that means that you have more fluid than is necessary, and that has increased risks with it as well. So they had to monitor that and monitor the levels, look at the pockets of fluid and measure that with each ultrasound. But then to top it off, she was breech. I was so hoping to not have to have a C-section, and I tried. I went to my midwife, I Googled things, I YouTubed things, trying to find ways and exercises to get this baby to flip around and be in a normal position, head down, but no, she wanted to stay in this V position, like this. So this whole time I've been rubbing like this notch, this, what it felt like was maybe her bum up there at the top of my belly. It was actually her head the whole time. So she was basically in a V position with her head up and her butt down and her feet up by her face. I have plenty of ultrasounds to show it, where she's grabbing onto her feet. So she ended up staying in a breech position. I could not get her to flip. So we knew that by the time the 37-week mark came around, she was going to be a C-section if we couldn't get her to flip. The C-section went well. She came out screaming and crying. But unfortunately, I only got to spend a few minutes with her because they had to whisk her away to the NICU.
There you go.
There we go. She had basically inhaled some of the fluid and was having a hard time breathing. So they took her away to the NICU, and I got reports on a fairly consistent basis as the day progressed along from my husband and also from the neonatal nurse practitioner that she was not doing as well. They at first had her on just some extra oxygen via a mask, a face mask, and then they had to advance that to what they call a BiPAP, where they were forcing air for her to breathe, and then eventually she had to be intubated. That was not what I wanted to hear, but I knew that she needed to be taken care of, and whatever was needed was needed. So we, of course, prayed for her and visited her often and stood by her little warmer where she was sleeping. She had to be on the ventilator for probably about 2.5 days, and then they felt that she was ready to be weaned down and took her off, and she did really well. But she had to keep, they had to keep her there to monitor her, make sure that she was doing the suck, swallow, breathe without, because at first she had a feeding tube because she was on the ventilator. She couldn't, nurse. So
I see your lips going down. Do I smell bad?
The lady's 10.
I love this.
I finally got to nurse her on, I think, day 3 of being there in the hospital, and it was just, I was ecstatic because that was what I wanted to do from day 1. And she did well, but she was a sleepy baby, so it was hard to keep her awake. I recovered well, and we went home on day 4. She was discharged from the NICU. She had passed with flying colors and was ready to go home.
Gonna open your eyes? You gonna open your eyes?
And so we went home on day 4. However, on May the 6th, 11 days after I had her, is a day I will never forget. The reason why this day is a day I'll never forget is because I almost didn't make it. It was a normal day. I had gotten up to take a shower mid-morning. I think it was maybe late morning, I'm sorry. I had gotten up to take a shower. It was late in the morning, and got out, was in the middle of drying myself off, and noticed that I started to bleed a lot heavier than I had been after having the baby. Not to give you guys too much information, but I mean, women bleed after they have babies. So this suddenly picked up, and it was kind of concerning, but I thought, okay, I'll just keep an eye on it. I'll monitor this and not freak out over it. It may just be that I had overdone it that morning, even though I couldn't really figure out what I'd overdone. And we'll just go lay down, rest, and take it easy. My husband had to leave to go drop my daughters off. They were working for the day, and he was running some errands after that. And I gave him a heads up. I said, you know, not to scare you, but I just want you to know that I am bleeding heavier than I normally have been, and I'm just going to keep an eye on it, and I'll keep you up to date as to what's going on. So as he left, he ended up leaving my youngest daughter at home with me. She's 13. I told her what was going on. I was very upfront with her, and asked her just to kind of help keep an eye on me. And I ended up sitting on my bed, and I decided, okay, I'm just going to check my blood pressure, see what it's at, and then I'll go lay down. Well, I checked my blood pressure, and it was a lot higher than I normally run. And that kind of concerned me, but I thought, okay, well, maybe it's just because I'm anxious over why I'm bleeding right now. So I went to go put my blood pressure cuff back, and suddenly felt this large gush of blood and clot, and just, yeah, I won't go into much more detail there. I ended up calling my husband at that point, and I said, listen, you probably need to head back home. This is not normal, and I need you to be here. And at that point, I had gotten up to the bathroom a few times because I was concerned about making a mess on my bed. And it just kept coming and kept coming. And I finally said, okay, I'm just gonna lay on the bathroom floor. I can't make a mess on anything there. I'll lay on the bathroom floor, and I'll wait for him to come home because he was on his way. He helped me to get completely dressed, and we headed off to the emergency room. This was concerning me at this point because it was very reminiscent of when I had a miscarriage and started suddenly bleeding really heavily. And I thought, oh great, here we go. I'm gonna have to go back in. They're gonna have to do a D&C. This is not gonna be cool. I just had a baby 11 days ago, just had a C-section 11 days ago. This is just great. And to take care of the newborn that I'm breastfeeding as well. So we headed to the ER, and the bleeding just kept coming and kept coming. They finally got me into a room, and I feel bad for my husband because he ended up having to try and take care of me and clean me up at times when the ER staff was busy. They were great. They did take care of me very well, but you know, they're strapped taking care of other patients too. The doctor came in, and he evaluated me and said, yeah, you are bleeding quite a bit, and we're just going to take you back into surgery. We're going to do a D&C and make sure, you know, we'll take a look and make sure that there's no parts of the placenta that may have been left behind, which is very unusual when you've had a C-section. So he took me back, and he said, you know, there is a small risk that you may have to have a hysterectomy should things not go well. And I said, okay, I signed consent and everything. By this time, our pastor had come to the emergency room. Him and his wife actually had come by, and they came to see us and pray with me. And he asked me this question as I was being rolled out of the emergency room that I was in. He said, you know, we were talking about the fact that I'd gone through a C-section already and had to possibly undergo this procedure again. He said, well, if you had the chance to do it, would you do it all over again? And I said, without hesitation, I said, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't care what I've had to go through. Having this baby and having any of my children, I would go through any of it all over again. Not woe is me and feel bad for me and feel sorry for me. No, it's okay. This is a part of life and things happen. So suck it up, buttercup. But in all honesty, I would absolutely have done it again. As I left, kissed my husband goodbye, and they took me off to have surgery. I remember coming to, as I was being wheeled into a room, and I kind of remember, you know, my eyes opening slowly, and I looked up at the clock right there at the foot of the bed on the wall, and it was probably about 11:30 at night at that point. And I knew immediately way too many hours had passed since I'd been taken back to have this, you know, DNC procedure. I knew at that point that I'd had to have a hysterectomy. All I knew at that point was it was okay, but I was in pain. I was in a lot of pain. Long story short, they ended up having to go in through my incision after they had tried doing the DNC. The bleeding just kept happening. I just kept bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. My husband tells me this story that, you know, my doctor seemed very sure that, you know, things were going to go well. He was very positive, you know, when we were getting ready to go back for the procedure to begin with. But at one point in time, he came out and told my husband, listen, we're about to lose your wife. She has bled so much that we need to take her uterus at this point. We've tried doing the DNC. That didn't work. I kept bleeding, so they placed what's called a Bakri balloon up inside the uterus. They inflate that, and when the pressure is applied against the area that's bleeding, that's supposed to, obviously pressure against a bleeding area makes it stop. Well, the bleeding just kept happening around it, and apparently I lost so much blood that my hemoglobin was down to around the 4 range, which is not good for a woman. It should be anywhere from 12 to about 16. So needless to say, I lost more than I should have. He had to give me 3 units of blood, and that only successfully brought my hemoglobin back up to around the 8 range. It hadn't hit me very hard that I almost lost my life until days later when I came home on Mother's Day. My sweet, sweet children just showered me with love and affection, and I could not have been more grateful that God really gave me a second chance. My brand new baby could have been motherless. All my other children would have been left without their mom. I share this with you because I want you to know that things in life can be hard. We experience things that can either shape us into a better person or break us. I opt to be shaped into a better person. I opt to be more grateful for what I have around me, thankful for being able to wake up and breathe another breath. I'm grateful that God allowed this to happen because He had a purpose in it. He has a purpose in it. And who am I to question that? So I hope that explains a little bit about why we ended up taking a break and deciding to focus on family, on our children, on each other. And take a moment, if you have some kiddos, give them a hug. If you're married, go and hug your spouse. You don't know when you might not have it tomorrow. So I will sign off and say goodnight. It's getting cold out here, and I'm gonna go inside and hug my kiddos and tell them I love them. We'll see you guys later. Bye.
Ha